everybody. Welcome to Nobody Asked Us with Des and Kara. We are super excited about this episode today. We're feeling spicy. We're ready to go. I'm joined by my co-host, Des Linden. Des, how are you today?
Good. I'm gonna punch in presented by TCS, although maybe afterwards they're gonna be like, this was the episode where we were good without you saying that.
No, huge props to TCS who are sponsoring us and helping us keep this podcast going. So thank you for that. Des, everyone needs to know, how's Rivers? We need an update.
He's doing really well. He's crashed out on the couch right now. It's fun. Like, you learn about their personality, but a couple hours ago, I went out for a run. 15 minutes into my run, apparently he got scolded because he was playing out in the yard. He came in and then he peed in the house. So Ryan was like, no, like, he's really harsh with it. So that was 15 minutes into my run. I come back from a 12-mile run. So this is hour plus later. And he was so sad. Like, you could tell it, like, he's a very sensitive fella is what we're learning. He was still really upset that he had got yelled at.
Oh, he really felt that.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
So we're learning about him.
And how's it going with your other dog, with Boston?
Good. They're getting along better and better. I don't think he loves the puppy attention all the time, but he's managing.
Do they play a little bit?
They wrestle all the time. And then like the Boston, the older dog's like, okay, we're done. We're going inside and relaxing. And then Rivers is like, but I still want to eat your tail. Like, I just chase him and pull on his tail. I'm like, that's so mean. So we separate them quite a bit too. How is your brand new bearded dragon?
Okay, Des. So Colt has wanted one for years, but they live 8 to 12 years in captivity. And you have to feed them like live things, And so I was just like, no, for years and years. So he's had this African dwarf frog that died this summer while we were in Minnesota. And it lived longer than it was supposed to. By the way, it was only supposed to live like 3 to 4 years. It lived like 6 years. Nice. Apparently we're good pet owners because everything lives forever. So then he started back in on the bearded dragon. And I took a picture of it. I should post it. I came home from a run one day and he had all this research about like how to take care of it, all this stuff. And I just flat out told him, I was like, Colton, if we get a bearded dragon now, it will be halfway through its life when you go to college, which means that I have to get the roaches and feed it to it, all that stuff. Well, maybe there's a rescue option. So then he researched and found a bearded dragon rescue. So this bearded dragon was 7 years old. I'm like, this couldn't be more perfect. Even if we're the best caretakers ever, it's dying before he goes to college. So we're interacting with this rescue and we're like, we're in Minnesota. We can't get this set up until we get back to Colorado. So anyway, the morning that we check in, we say, hey, today we're going to get our setup. We should have it to you in a couple hours. She's like, oh, I have bad news. We actually just adopted her out last night.
She got
tears. The whole no, we didn't get a baby. So the whole thing. And I'm just like, you could have told us that there was another person involved, right. But that's fine. Whatever, things happen. So I'm start Googling and there's apparently bearded dragon rescue everywhere because people get them and they're cute and they're fun for like 3 or 4 years. And then they're like, what the hell? This thing's never going to die. So we went around to a few different places and we found one. They don't know how old she is. She is a rescue. They think she's at least 3 years old, which is still way too young. But we adopted her, and now Margot is a part of the Goucher family.
Margot. Did you pick the name, or did she come with the name Margot? And is she really responsive to her name, or could you call her anything?
You could call her anything. So the one that Colt had his heart set on that was 7 years old was named Margot. This one, they were calling her Johnny at the store, and then it turned out she was a female. So Colt named her Margot. I have to say, like, that I'm going to sound insane. I actually like really, really love this thing. We've only had it for like 5 days, but it will like rest on me. And if I pet it under its chin, she closes her eyes.
That's kind of cute.
It's really cute. And this is good because she is going to outlive Colt's high school experience. And so Margot and I have to be buds because I'm going to have to take care of her.
Colt's going to end up taking her. He's going to be like, I figured it out. And you're going to be like, well, here's the thing. And you're going to talk him into leaving Margot so that you guys can have your friendship is what's going to happen. It's
That
like
is
the
a
classic like
possibility.
dad being like, we don't want pet. And then like the next thing you know, he's wearing a t-shirt of the dog face and they're watching TV together, you know?
That is a possibility. We were at the pet store getting stuff for Margot, and we bumped into this girl, and she's like, "Oh, do you have a bearded dragon?" And Colt's talking to her, and she was like super cute. Like she was definitely in college, like a very cute girl, super friendly, outgoing. And she has a bearded dragon. And she's like, "No, it's the easiest. I've had it since high school. It's the easiest thing to take care of." And we get out to the car and Colt goes, "Mom, did it make you feel better that that girl who looked totally normal has one?" And I go, "It shouldn't, but it did." It did make me feel better. So
That's really
yeah,
funny.
I'm a sucker. And I mean, I swear we're done with pets. I swear. But
No,
I don't
I don't
know.
believe it. Other big news, Colt and braces. Yeah. That's new, right?
Yeah, he got braces.
How does
That
he
is
like
new.
how is that for him? Is he okay with it? Does his face hurt? Does his head hurt? Do his teeth hurt?
Yeah, so he's been really excited to get braces.
Yeah.
And then after he got him on, he was in hell. And he
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Why did I want this?" The first night I helped him floss and it took us like 45 minutes. And part of it was because he was so sensitive.
Yeah.
But I think the realization of like, oh, this is like a thing that I'm gonna have to deal with for a year and a half. But I keep telling him, like, you're gonna be so happy when you're an adult that we did this. And
Yeah.
he's less sore. Last night he was able to, I made like salmon and rice and he was able to eat that. The first couple nights we blended his food. I came home yesterday and he had blended goldfish. And I was like, this is such a preteen thing to do. He just like left it in the cupboard in a bowl with a spoon in there.
There you go.
And I was like, dude, you could just suck him or something. Like, come
Such
on.
a boy.
So it's such a boy. Yeah. So no, it's good. He's only going to have him for like a year and a half. And like I told him, you're lucky. Like a lot of people can't afford to do this and you'll be happy when you're an adult. So yeah. I don't feel bad for him or anything.
I hated braces. I had them for
Did
a
you
while.
have them?
I did. The worst part was the rubber bands. Like you get through the whole thing and then they're like, we're going to rubber band this section to this section and it's barely going to fit on there and you're going to feel like there's a vice on your face. And I'm like,
Yeah. Do you have a retainer still?
I wore my retainer for about 3 days. And, you know,
Wow.
wasted a lot of money
I'm sure your parents
on my
are thrilled.
braces. Well, hopefully they don't listen to this, but I think they're probably a part of the downloads. But
Your
yeah,
teeth are straight though.
They're straight enough, and I don't have to deal with a retainer. So, but
Yeah,
I was
good.
using that segue of sensitive to talk about some of the controversies in track and field.
There's so many. I feel like there's so many controversies right now. And I feel like there just has been in general, especially in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is what we're going to talk about today. I don't know how many we're going to get to because it seems like there's a lot. But we're going to just kind of focus in on a couple.
So if you're sensitive.
Yeah.
If you're sensitive.
Yeah. Listen,
check out.
I love that you brought this up because we can have differences of opinions and still respect each other. I feel like we've gotten to this place where it's like, if somebody disagrees with what you think, you're like, well, forget it. Yeah. I used to be a fan of Des Linden. Now I know she wants to run in the heat.
Like,
I can't support her anymore.
I've lost so much respect for you.
Right. What? So remember, if you disagree with what I say or with what Des says, like this is just one little thing of like all the things in the world. And it's okay that not everybody agrees all the time. So
yeah. I also agree with there can be agree to disagree. And then there's like being open to the possibility that you're not always right and I'm not always right. And like we can find some middle ground. Yeah, I know. I'm completely aware of that, which is crazy to me that I just feel like a lot of people will not budge just on, and I don't know why. It's like, let's have a conversation. Let's just have a conversation.
So we're going to have a conversation today about like 2 to 3, 4 topics, depending on timing. But the first thing that I wanted to bring up was there seems to be this controversy on this media group called New Gen. And we briefly messaged each other about it. If I'm being totally honest, I didn't know what it was really before this supposed like this controversy blew up. But it's a media group that's been around, I think, for a few years. Some younger guys that started at the University of Oregon filming workouts and stuff with like Cole Hawker and Cooper Tier and doing stuff there. And now they've grown somewhat. I don't even know if we should be talking about this because I don't know it that well. I've just kind of done a little dive as I've seen it on the, the comments about it, but grown a little bit. They have a publication, and apparently they have a camp where they bring in high school athletes and teach them how to do social media and things like that. Am I getting this right? As far as you know?
That sounds correct. I think, they're trying to be innovative in their media. Bring a different spin is always kind of the thing I get. And it's definitely catered towards a very young audience, which is not us.
Right. No.
And yeah, and they've become fairly popular enough that they're, they do have this camp, and they're supported. This camp, at least, is supported by brands, and they do a lot of activations with legitimate brands. So I think it legitimizes their brand as well.
Right. So they had this camp, like you said, sponsored by other brands I guess it was in Boulder. And they posted some pictures from a photo shoot they did there. And it was like a lightning rod. I don't know if people have seen the images, but they were sort of like, they did this photo shoot based on bullying I don't know. It was like supposedly from so long ago, but it was like maybe the early 2000s or something.
It was like Mean Girls or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Mean Girls.
Lindsay Lohan.
And yes. Yeah. And so they did this photo shoot, and they posted some of the photos, and there was a photo of a boy pushing a girl in the locker. And then there was other photos of like a girl with her face in the toilet, and people reacted to these photos. So I don't know that you and I will see eye to eye on this one because we haven't really talked about it, but I am curious what your thoughts are about all this.
I didn't really see how it connected to track and field. And, I guess I would want to see the scope of the camp and like what was intended, what was the intent, what were they trying to gain or offer to their campers. If it's media at large and like just figuring out how to do media, I suppose like that's something. But if it was really track and field catered, like how is this for the sport? How does this promote brands? How does this promote your own personal brand? Wasn't a huge. I don't think there was much on the positive side from my perspective. But I guess. And I do this all the time. I play devil's advocate with myself. Like if art is supposed to evoke emotion, they hit the nail on the head.
Crush it. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because there were high school kids involved. And so I don't want to come down on them. They're adults, but they're not adults, right? Like I did stuff in high school that I'm so glad there was no social media, because stuff that I thought was cool was definitely not. But I think for me, I didn't know that much about this group. And so this caused me to kind of go and look at some of the stuff they've done over the last couple of years. And, their whole thing is like a new angle, like a new generation, new way to promote the sport. But when I kind of looked through some of their stuff, it felt some of the stuff I wasn't sure how it related to running. And granted, I'm 45, I'm not your target audience. So you're probably crushing it. I just don't get it. But a lot of this stuff for me felt like the men are cool and the women were kind of sexualized. And for me, I kind of felt like, well, there's nothing new about that. Like that's the way it's been forever. So again, not their target audience, but I did feel a little bit like, this kind of looks like how it's always been. The men are the tough guys out running and the women are posing a little bit more provocatively.
Yeah. I think that kind of why I wanted to talk about this was that like we didn't have social media, but you're right. And you kind of hit the nail on the head with this is like, how many things did you do in high school that you thought were like really fucking cool? And then if they came up, like even like your Twitter, when it gives you like your Twitter anniversary, it's like, would you like to see your first tweet ever? You're like, oh God, no.
Please no. Yeah.
Yeah, like that would probably be super embarrassing. Like if I looked back at like the first 20 tweets I had, because that was however long ago, and um, I've grown up. And so you have this content that's out there, and I think it's great that people are trying to be innovative and do this new angle. I agree with you. It's not really new, and it's going to live forever. Like,
Right.
this isn't, like if you and I did weird, stupid stuff, but it was on a disposable camera and you took it into the Walgreens and you're like, I'll go pick those up in a week. And then you looked at it and you're like, even a week later, you're like, oh, we have to shred these.
Yeah.
Just that space away from that time away from it, the space away from the moment. And then you can kind of reflect and be like, oh, I don't really want people to see these. This was not as cool as I thought it was. But that doesn't exist anymore. So I guess for me, talking about this was, if you are one of those kids who happens to listen to this 40-plus-year-old podcast, think about that, before you participate in that type of content or post the next thing. I think it was David Monty who used to always say, don't put anything out on social that you wouldn't want on the front page of the New York Times. And that was kind of the rule of thumb.
Yeah. And like you're saying, we didn't have to worry about that,
Yeah.
And now, like, even though those images were taken down, they were screenshot by so many people, and so they will live forever. And I don't think that this defines those kids. I don't think it's as like something they're going to carry around forever. I actually think this is going to blow over, but it is a good little lesson of, I really like that. If it make sure you're comfortable, because it's going to be on the front page of the New York Times. Like, stuff will live forever now. And that's scary. And I worry about that for my son. He's not that smart, right? He thinks stuff's cool that is not cool. And if he had the ability to post it somewhere, that is terrifying to me.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, like, the adults in that situation are not really adult or mature enough, in my opinion, or at least it appears. And I mean, I don't know them, so that's not fair. But what I've seen, it's like I would question if they're mature enough to be taking on this type of, at least working with younger kids.
I agree.
That's a big responsibility.
It's a huge responsibility. And it's, again, I don't know them either, but it seems like they're in their young 20s and they're not that far out of the college scene. And so maybe working with high school kids isn't the right thing yet, be a little bit older. So yeah, basically, I don't know. A lot of people want this group canceled forever. I'm curious to see what they do if they learn from it and say, hey, like, we had to really take a look in the mirror and moving forward, this is what we're going to do. Or if they are just going to be done. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think they'll come back?
I hope they do. I think you have to be willing to admit some fault. I mean, and I don't know, maybe they don't see any fault in what they did. Maybe they're totally good with it. And then you keep running into the same problem. And then, yes, you probably are likely to be canceled at some point. But I think new and interesting, and like the concept, like conceptually what they want to do is great for track and field. Like, we're right. Like, you kind of run into the same thing over and over, and they're still bringing the same thing over. Like, okay, try again. You didn't get it this time. Like, try again. And, use that creative concept to push the sport forward, as you have stated your mission is to do so.
Right.
But you just missed it this time, in my opinion.
Right. I agree.
So I hope they stick
push
around.
the sport forward.
No.
Yeah, me too. Fresh blood's good. Hopefully, yeah. But yes, they'll learn a little bit. Okay, well, okay, we agreed there. I wasn't sure. Okay. I wasn't sure how that was going to go. Okay, here's another topic. And this is the hot button topic. And this is the one that everyone's talking about, and that you somehow, by saying you weren't worried about it, you became a little bit of a lightning rod yourself.
Let's go.
Olympic Trials Marathon. In February, we knew it was being held in Orlando. That had already been announced. And you and I actually talked about that on our podcast, about how, according to the reporting, people on the board or the chair, like they wanted it to go to Chattanooga. There was some conflict there. It ended up going to Orlando. And we talked about that a little bit. I've since found out a little bit more about that, but it's in Orlando. We all know that. And I guess it was last week they announced that the start time would be at noon. And wow, people are not happy about this. So I'm not really even sure where to start with this. But that's what happened. And you maybe offer up the little bit of perspective you did on Twitter and how that.
Yeah. I'll give you my response, which was something along the lines of I actually looked at my training logs. I generally do my run at around 11 anyhow. So this will give me one more hour to dink around in the morning and then go train because you're going to be training at the same time. And I think it slows down the race. Obviously, it's going to be warmer in the afternoon. So I think that kind of negates some of the benefits of super shoes, or it can, right? Like you just can't run as fast in the heat. So that's a huge advantage for me. If the pace just can't be that rich. So I was like, this is great news for me. This gives me a chance. I'm all for it. Yeah. And it was not well received by many people.
And that's what's interesting. I think that the general consensus is it at noon in Orlando in February could be really, really hot and humid. And that's putting athletes in danger. And that seems to be the focus. And so I'm curious about your perspective there. Like, what do you think becomes dangerous conditions? But I come at it from a slightly different perspective. I'm not going to be running there. And even though I haven't been offered the job, I hope that I'm going to be calling that race for NBC. And so I was like quiet at first because I was like, if I say anything, people are going to be like, you're with NBC, you're evil. Right. This is all for NBC. And so I do want to offer my perspective and what I've kind of learned. But for you, I have so many questions for you because you've trained in Orlando.
Yeah.
At around the same time of year.
Do you want to know why? You
yeah.
trained in Orlando around that time of year?
Yeah, why?
Because of the weather. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. You can go out any time of day and you can go for a run and it's it's great. And I will say I wouldn't look at February. It's a February 3rd race, so you can look at February's numbers, but you're probably going to get more accurate information from most of January. Well, you could probably split the difference between January and February. February 3rd. This isn't. Now we trained there January, February. We would come down from Michigan, and go for the weather because it's beautiful.
Okay, well, that's so interesting to me because someone from your former team has been expressing their concern over this. So the weather is beautiful. I saw you say that you looked back at your training logs to see if you were remembering it incorrectly, that the weather was good there. And what you found when you looked back was that just what you said, the weather was good.
It's a law of averages, and I think that's why that's why I'm focusing on the average. Like some days are going to be really hot, some days are going to be really cold, and really hot. It's not that hot, in my opinion. I think if it were April, I would have a much stronger opinion. March, much stronger opinion. But from what I remember, I don't see a need for an uproar personally until there's and this is me as well. Like, okay, I don't worry about things that I don't believe I just don't think we need to worry about it until there's something to worry about. Like the averages say 75's the high. That's pretty comfortable. If we get there and it's 90 that week or 89s, 85s, like then we have a thing to worry about. And I think we saw it in the track that 10,000 meters for the last trials, they accommodated to the athletes. Like it was like, this is really actually dangerous. Let's make an adjustment. So I think personally that the noon time slot, prime time, all the eyeballs on the product, you have this opportunity to sell a ton of ad space. the logos that you're not going to get to wear at the Olympics are the ones you can wear. Like, this is where you show value to your sponsors. Like, the upside for me is just so much greater than something that we don't know if it's a problem yet. So let all of that best case scenario happen and like sell, like get the ads done, make all the money off of it, you know, and then they know it's in Orlando and that there's a possibility it could be too warm. So like there should be contingencies in every single contract that's being written. And then when you have the data, when you have the actual temperatures of, you know, we're getting close, you can come into the conversation and go, hey, this is what we've brought to the table for the athletes with this time slot. This is what's on the line. Do you want X or do you want Y? Like, I want to, if give me the best case scenario, and then if we have to adjust, we adjust. But I don't train 60 miles a week because I might get injured running 120. It's like you try to get as fit as possible, and then if you get a little nicked up, you adjust. That's just my tactic for life.
Yeah. So it's my understanding that the athletes are going to be getting an email explaining a lot of the decisions of why it's in Orlando, what it's going to be like, what the contingencies. It's my understanding that that stuff is coming to the athletes very soon, that USATF has heard and that they specifically understand that the word transparency has come up a lot. And so they are going to be in contact with the athletes. I was privy to a little bit of that information because, again, coming from the side where I come from, I also want to know why these decisions are made. So diving into the weather a little bit more, there was a high performance team who researched the weather in Orlando in early February over the past 30 years. And they found that it had never crossed over. And granted, I've had people from Orlando be like, Kara, this is crazy. I live in Orlando, right? So I don't. I can't even remember the last time I was in Florida. So full disclosure. But according to this research team, there was never an instance in which the weather was so bad that a contingency plan would have had to come into play. And I think that USATF hears a lot. The athletes want a course that's going to mimic the Olympic conditions. And the difficult thing is that there aren't a ton of cities that are bidding to have these trials, right? There were only 2 this time. And
one was disqualified.
One was disqualified. And the other one, on the one hand, is good because the weather is similar to what it will be like in Paris. I know the Paris race starts earlier, but also Paris is hotter that time of year. So the weather does mimic it more. Now, the course is flat. So it doesn't have the hills that Paris will have. But I think it would be good for people to understand it's really hard to make everything the exact same. Like, I think about the trials for London were in Houston, and I freaking love those trials. I mean, the organizing committee was amazing and awesome, and we all felt loved. But they tried to mimic it as best they could by doing it criterium, because they knew that the London course had this short loop at the beginning and then 3, I believe 8-mile loops after that. And so they tried to mimic that. But as you know, because you ran in Houston and you were in London, the courses itself,
right,
very, very different.
Yeah.
I mean, the course in London had a bazillion turns and like crazy surfaces, where in Houston, it was like really lovely surface and not, we were doing these big long loops. So we didn't have a ton of turns. We had that one little thing that Shalane and I called a popsicle. But so you try to line up some things that you can, but there's never going to be like this perfect situation. And also, it's got me thinking, because if I was running, I'd be worried about the weather, but it also got me thinking about the majors that I ran. You never knew what you were going to get. And even the Olympic trials in 2016, we thought it was going to be cool, like almost perfect weather.
Yeah.
And then about 2 weeks out, my coach started saying, it's going to be hot. It's going to be hot. We got to, you got to get in the sauna. You got to wear sweats. Yeah. Put the layers on. And so, I've heard people argue that now the training will be different because you have to put your body through all these stressors in the training. And I'm not an athlete at that level anymore, but I'm curious your thoughts on that. Like, do you think that, I mean, I kind of feel like I know your answer, but do you think you need to stress your body and train in the heat and do all these things in case it is the worst case scenario?
I mean, no. I think you make adjustments in your race plan. I think that most heat protocols are like 10 days. I think I've seen some mentions of like, well, it's not fair. Some athletes don't have the support to adapt to these potential conditions. Like, if you can't buy extra layers, let me know. I think Brooks, would love to throw some your way. They would support. If your brand's not giving you enough product allotment, we can get you some long sleeves. 10 days. Maybe you can get a sauna pass or a gym pass for 10 days. You just remind your body how to sweat, and then you have to think a little bit differently about your race plan. I think it becomes the responsibility of the athlete to race differently, adjust. You have to adapt to the situation. And I think that that's sort of what seems to be problematic is like, well, I want to know exactly what I'm getting and exactly how to respond and exactly, and it's just like, that's not what the games are going to be. You have to respond to adversity. You have to be adaptable. It's not, when you get to the games, they're not going to go exactly how you planned. You're not going to be prepared for every scenario. So to me, it's like, you're going to learn about how people respond to stress just simply by putting it at noon, even if the conditions are perfect. This announcement has been a fascinating exercise in seeing who hasn't responded at all, who was like, cool, this is fine, and who was like, absolutely not. I think there are people that are already preparing for worst case scenario. It's like, well, got to be adaptable.
I do feel like throughout this, and being perfectly honest, when I was an athlete, I was really quick to judge USATF, and I still can be. If I'm being
Yeah.
really, really honest, I still can be really quick to judge. But I don't think that all the reporting has done due diligence. There's been a lot of comments about like, this is just to fleece the pockets of USATF. And USATF actually doesn't make any money off of the marathon trials at all. Any money that is somehow made through ticket sales, that goes to the organizing committee. The television broadcast, that's the USOC and NBC paying for that and getting whatever they get out of that. USATF doesn't put a commercial on there, I mean, USOPC might, but they're not in control of that. And so I think for me, this is a bigger picture moment of, because everybody's first reaction is like, screw USATF.
Totally.
They don't care about the athletes. I hate them, And so for me, this is like a bigger picture of like, whoa,
Right.
what's happening here? Actually, all these decisions were made, believe it or not, to showcase our athletes, to put them on TV during prime time where local affiliates won't go to something else, will actually stay with this because of the timing, and showcase our athletes. And I already said this on another podcast, and I guess I wasn't supposed to, but since I already said it, I'm just going to go with
this
it.
This is ours, so go for it.
This is groundbreaking prize money,
Yeah.
$600,000. And the last trials was groundbreaking at $480. Now we're at $600,000. We're also 3 hours on primetime television, NBC dedicating to, the network. And it's hard because you're trying to build up the platform and build up the viewership and have people watch this and get really excited about running. And I think when I was an athlete, I obviously didn't understand this side of the business because I wasn't on this side of the business. But it's hard to see like this is groundbreaking and it's done to help the athletes and to make the athletes be as popular as possible. And so then when the negativity comes, it's really tough because it's like, oh man, like this was actually done for you guys,
Right. This is opportunity. Like this is an opportunity, not like, we're not trying to put you in a stressful situation for fun, like for sport. Yes. It's like, no, this is good for all the brands, all the athletes.
It is. And I think for me, it's been this bigger thing of like, oh, wow, USATF needs to talk to the athletes more.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a very good point.
And I think, because I think I was just scrolling through Twitter and it was like, middle finger to USATF, middle finger to NBC. And it was like, wow, that's everyone's first reaction. And I understand sometimes we see things happen that we're like, we don't get it. And there's plenty of things that I don't get still. But maybe we could do a better job in communication so that the athletes are like pumped about this opportunity instead of, like looking at it as a worst case scenario. And it's my understanding that USATF has heard this, they understand this, and they are going to be reaching out to all qualifiers. But another thing I was thinking about was hosting the Olympic Trials Marathon is you lose money.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a city who is putting unprecedented money into it, who is super excited. They're going to be announcing these some other things that I can't talk about yet, but like for the athletes, they are so excited. The mayor's so excited. The community is so excited. And when they hear complaints, I'm trying to think of in 4 years who's going to want to bid, right? You're going to lose money on this event, but you get to highlight your city. I mean, there's obviously benefits, but you get to be a part of the Olympic Games at a level.
Right.
But if athletes are unhappy, then you kind of feel like, well, why would I bid for that?
Yeah, it's a tough sell. I mean, if there were only two people in the process, two cities in the process this time, and one was disqualified, I mean, I think it gets, and this is like all of the stuff I feel like rolled out later than normal because it felt almost like a fight to make it happen. So it's, I hope cities still find the upside to it. And I think once you have your show and, it goes really well and I think people, they want to look at LA and be like, well, this went so poorly and this has already happened. And didn't we learn from that? Well, LA that was like unseasonably warm. And it was they did a great job organizing and then they were presented with this challenge and they could have responded better. But to compare that to what Florida is doing or what Orlando is doing, like I think Orlando, it could be hot. And so hopefully they have contingencies and even if the high is 75, they're going to have, hopefully knock on wood, enough water and they're going to have fluid stations for everyone. And, they're not going to have the soapy towel. Like they're not going to be scrambling, right? Like
Right.
This is like, I'm giving them the chance to do it really, really well. And I'm not looking at LA as like, well, they failed last time, like different organizers, different city. Like some of them are probably coming back and like, oh yeah, I learned from LA to Atlanta and like, I've heard the people running the fluid stations, same people as Atlanta. Phenomenal job. So I feel like that'll be amazing. And I don't know. I think comparing it to LA, I've taken this on a strange turn. That wasn't where we started, but I think fine. Comparing it to LA is probably not the best. I mean, it's not apples to apples.
No, and even in LA, the day after the marathon, it was like cool.
Right. I think I heard Taylor Swift practicing, like rehearsing the next day. Just a little side note. I swear to God. Because it was the Grammys, I think. And I was like, I know this song. But okay, sorry, go ahead.
That's amazing. Well, the next day it wasn't as hot. I mean, I ran in those trials and it was bad. But again, I completely changed my race strategy. I mean, like going in, I thought I could run 225. I did not think that more than 2 women would do that. But then as it got closer, my coach said 229 is going to make this team and it's going to take someone who runs a smart 229 is making this team. And I didn't end up running 229, but everyone that made it did. I mean, I guess you ran did you run 228? It doesn't matter. 228, 229, 229 made the team. So he was right. And I think like for me, I would be telling athletes, go back and watch that and look at how people raced and look at how people raced in the first half and how they raced in the second half and who fared better.
Go ahead. Sorry, finish.
No, go ahead.
What was your recovery like from that versus Houston? Because I think it's interesting too to look at how the Olympic teams performed after each race, both flat courses. I just want to hear your thoughts first, and then I'll give you my opinion.
Well, I actually was like the most athletic person I've ever been in my life that day. I was like grabbing T-shirts and grabbing water and carrying it and getting my bottles. So I actually don't think, I I think that, yes, the oppression of the heat, I slowed down. It would have been stupid for me to go out and try to solo 225. But I don't really think I fell apart because of the conditions. I fell apart the last 2 miles, but it wasn't physical. It was 100% emotional because I knew I wasn't making it. And if I remember correctly, I didn't have that hard of a time recovering from that. I don't think so. Houston, I ran a little outside of my fitness. But again, it didn't take me that long to recover from that either. I mostly had like a really sore neck because I was so stiff the whole race. And then I don't know if you remember, but we went to like media or something, and like I couldn't write because I had given myself like carpal tunnel in the race because I was so tense. So like my wrists were sore for like a couple days. Really embarrassing. But anyway, for me personally, I don't remember the recovery of each that bad because I do remember after the Rio trials, I foolishly jumped back into training right away, which I shouldn't have done. Because I wanted to make the 10K team and I should have just taken 2 or 3 weeks. But I was obviously well enough that I could do that. How was your recovery?
I mean, I guess I think they were both, well, the LA one was much smoother, you know, like for me, and I guess what I was bringing up here is that if you're not hammering 222, 221, like if you don't have to go and run an American record pace effort on the front, you know, you're going to recover quicker. The heat, if it is hot, is going to limit how fast you can go. I think in London, we were all like, that was one of the fastest trials. The men's side was crazy. Like our times were pretty quick for, you know, what it was back then. We all ran pretty quick. And that I feel like there was a 50% dropout rate at the London Games. It was D. Ryan Hall and myself all dropped out. And I wonder how much of that was from really going to the well in the trials. And then it was on concrete as well. Like maybe that sort of effort is too taxing leading into the game. So you want to test adversity. You want to test, stress, like who responds to stress, but you don't want to totally cripple your team because the effort you've put in to qualify, well, now you're just a tourist at the games because you're licked from the trials.
Totally.
So another perspective.
That is interesting. And also different vein, but I looked up the weather from Rio because I just remember you guys looking really hot. it was really hot. And it looked like the women's race when it started, it was at 66. But what I saw, the men's race started at 73, which is potentially the high in Orlando. So just for some context and perspective, right? Like, is it the perfect, most ideal to start at 70? Of course not. No, it's not. But it's not like it's not that it hasn't been done, right? And in a very big way and at a very big and important championship.
Like the summer games.
Like the summer Olympic games. Yeah, I was looking like even Paris, it got up to 104 in August, I think last year. So there's anywhere you go, while I do understand the concern, I think we want perfect conditions, and perfect conditions really are more for chasing those fast times. Because of the way when we have world championships and when we have the Olympic Games, perfect conditions are going to be probably pretty few and far between moving forward.
Yeah.
Or ever.
I mean, this is another thing too. Like I thought about it and was like, well, but it actually could be really hot. Like I went out for this announcement comes out. I went out for my run the next day at 11 because it's what I do. And it was warm. And I was like, I'm 100% going to be the person who ends up in medical because I've opened my mouth and I'm an idiot. Like this is actually very uncomfortably hot. And I was thinking about it, I was like, like I wonder, and I started thinking through these things. I'm not going to give them away because I came back and I was like, I messaged someone at Brooks. I was like, I have like 3 different ideas. Can we get a call? And, I think that these could be really smart leading into the trials if it's warm. So we saw innovation impact the 16 and the 20 trials. If you don't think there's an opportunity for innovation, you're missing out. That's a
Oh,
good
look at
thing,
that.
like get your brand's products at the highest level, all the eyeballs on them, impacting the game. That's a win for athletes. So
That is a win. Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to see the reaction and the fallout, and um it feels like there's a lot of anger from the athletes. And so I was just curious because you were the opposite of most people. Did you get any negativity from anyone, or were you just like, hey, this is how I feel, so
I'm
whatever?
I'm sure I'm sure there was some. I think there was a few comments directly to me, which I sort of chuckled at. Um, but I mean, I don't take it personally. I'm just like, yeah, your perspective is your perspective. That's fine. And really, at the end of the day, like it, people are allowed to be angry. That's certainly their right. For me, the best thing again is my way to manage this is go, okay, here's the upside, here's the upside, here's the opportunity, here's you know a chance to do whatever. I'm going to find the positives in this situation. And the race is scheduled for noon. So I feel like that's a good place to start. Like, let's look at the situation and see like how I can use my strengths here. And then if they change it and it's a more favorable, earlier weather start, I can run in that too. Like it doesn't change. Like that's okay. Well, now I'm not going to have to be as hot, or now I'm not going to have to adapt in this way. Like, so I guess if you plan for what's actually on the schedule and what is reality, I would start there and figure out how you can maximize your effort with reality. And then, then if they do change it, you feel better about it if you're one of those people who's worried. But if they don't, you're prepared for reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It seems
I
like I would just prepare for what is scheduled, and then you won't be disappointed if that's how it goes off. If they change it, you'll be pleasantly surprised.
yeah.
But I don't know. I'm
I'm
sure people will
curious.
be like, "Oh, well, you're just appeasing the man," and I can't believe you let
Right, right.
USATF roll
Oh,
over you
no.
like that.
I know people are going to think that about me, and I'm like, oh, I can't even believe I'm not defending anything. I'm just talking through the reality of why the event was chosen, where it was, and when it is actually in fact to help grow the sport and to promote US athletes, marathoners specifically. But that doesn't mean I work for the man. I'm just telling you that not all conspiracy theories are real. Like some are, but not all are. I'm curious too from your perspective. So um with it being at noon, that means it airs at live 9 o'clock on the West Coast, and that's great for viewership. It's a realistic time that people will be tuning in. I saw a lot of chatter on Twitter of, hey, the people that want to watch it, we'll watch it on CNBC or we'll watch it on a live stream. Like, we don't need it to be live. And from a person who is on the other side of it, it's like, no, we want it live. We want people invested. We want ratings to go up, because the more that ratings go up, then we are on NBC and not CNBC. We are on NBC and not on USA. So from your perspective, you're a competitive athlete. You have a shot at making another Olympic team. You've also sat in the booth. What would you say to other athletes about the start, like just the importance of the television coverage? I mean, individually, I guess it doesn't matter. Like if they don't care, they don't care. But if we care about growing the sport, we should care.
100%. I mean, that's what I would say. I feel like the CNBC thing is just it's kind of funny. Like I feel like we're watching the sport die. And I don't know, maybe I'm being dramatic, but it's like it's not, you can't find it, and now it's just getting like stuffed further and further into a space that I mean I haven't watched a Diamond League this year. And I hate to admit that. It's like I'll just refresh the results because I don't know when it's on. I don't know with the app, blah blah blah. Like the people that will watch at any time is awesome. You're going to watch at any time, but we want new people, fresh eyeballs. Like we want to get the biggest audience possible. And again, like no one wants to watch people dying in 90-degree heat. That's not good for the sport. The USATF is not going to want that as their product. Like I would imagine they'll adjust. But if you can showcase it to the biggest audience possible, it's just good for everyone.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean,
totally.
it's like start with the best case scenario. Like this is the best case scenario. I wouldn't want to like again, I wouldn't try to train for a marathon on 60 miles a week because I might get injured running too much. Like you got to if you want to run well, you got to do 120s or whatever it is, you know, and you might get hurt, but it might just be perfect.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
All right, have we beat this to a dead horse?
I'm
Like,
sure that someone will send us some counterpoints and we can dig into those when we get them. But for now, we've beat this thing.
well, I'm excited for the athletes to get an email that explains the athlete package, that explains some of the exciting things that are happening. And hopefully that'll lead to a conversation where athletes can see why some of the decisions were made and that they were, in fact, made for not to put money in Max Siegel's pocket, believe it or not, but to put money in the pockets of the athletes. And if they hopefully, since it seems like USATF is listening and is going to be communicating with the athletes, hopefully this leads to a better future where the transparency is just there from the beginning. So people
Yeah.
don't need their pitchforks to get the answers.
Right. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's going to go a long way. And I think like we all get super zoomed in on our thing. And it's like, well, this for me is not what I need or what I want or where my strengths are. It's like, okay, let's zoom out, look at the big picture, look at the whys, the hows, the whats, and then, you know, we can still make decisions, but have all the information in front of you, not just like this pinpoint that you're looking at. Like zoom out and look at it with a better perspective, or at least the whole picture or more of the picture. And so I think USATF giving that context will go a long way.
I think so too. Okay, I think we have time for one more controversy, and it's not very exciting, but I think it dovetails nicely with this.
Okay. Oh, I
Um,
don't remember what this was. Go.
it's not even that exciting, but I just think it kind of complements this. So, someone that we both follow on Twitter posted a picture about the good old days when people weren't wearing bibs. And then there was a pile on race bibs and then there was like links to articles about why do they wear race bibs? This isn't 1980 anymore or whatever. So it just got me thinking about bibs. So some of the complaints are obvious that the bibs are huge. At this day and age, do we really need them held down with safety pins and things like that? Do we really need them that big? But then a lot of the arguments were like, hey, anyone watching the race, they know who they're cheering for. They don't need a bib. At this point, we should know who everyone is. And so I had a lot of thoughts on that. And I'm happy to share them, but I'm curious if you have any bib
I
thoughts.
think we're gonna have similar ones. I mean, I don't know. I guess as I initially just think of it, a couple years ago, 100%, I'd be like, yeah, we don't need this as a broadcaster. I'm like, we need the bibs. They need to be
so
bigger.
Important.
I cannot read that. You need to like make sure that they're ordered. Like you can't have some with first name, some with nicknames, some with like. I need some logic here or the number on there. That makes a difference when you're calling a race and you're trying to make sure you're giving the right information about the right person at the right time. And it's just because our sport is so broad that Dominic Labalu from the I can't even what's the team? It's the refugee team has a breakout race and he wins the Diamond League, and you're like, thank God I have the notes and but it just wasn't expected, and that happens all the time. So I'm pro bibs. If you want to put the name on the kit directly in some way that I can read, as I'm calling a race, great. But it's also branding. Like these people are putting on the meet, they're investing in the meet, they want their coverage. Um, I I don't have a problem with bibs.
That was one of the things is that some athletes were saying that they can't post pictures of themselves from races because it has a competing logo on it. Did you ever run into that? Like, has Brooks ever told you can't post a photo because it has a swoosh on it or an Adidas logo or anything like that?
No, I've never had that be a problem. I mean, if you were like doing the pre-race layout your stuff, there's no rule that says you can't cover up the logo, so like you can do that. If I'm competing, I've never had a person be like, "Oh, did you switch to Adidas at the like?" Because I saw that Boston, you were wearing an Adidas bib when I'm very clearly wearing a Brooks kit and shoes and shorts. Like I don't think there's much confusion with that. So Brooks has never been like, yeah, don't use these. I think it's, and just to go back one more thing too, you said the fans all know the athletes. They don't. Like, not new fans, not if you've turned this on for the
No.
first time. Like that, again, like people are assuming that this is for the people that are going to watch no matter what. Like, you got to think about the people who never watch. And how do you get the people who never watch, who've stumbled upon this, to stay and watch and be the fan that always watches? So you're catering to a person that's not the main track and field fan, because you're going to watch no matter what if you're a big time track and field fan, right?
Yeah,
We want
that's
the
so
other
true.
people.
I just saw someone post a gymnast who commentates for gymnastics, and people are saying like, excuse me, like when you're on NBC, you don't talk about you don't talk about the skill set as much, and she was saying, hey, look, when I'm on NBC, I'm trying to sell the sport. I'm trying to get people to not change the channel. So I can't talk in these super technical terms that we all know, because then someone's going to be like, I've never gotten that. Click, change the channel. She's like, when I'm on USA or on Peacock or wherever, where it's just our core audience, I can geek out and talk all the terms, because that you guys are here because you understand all that. But a lot of it is constantly going back into growing the sport. And I think that's sort of a disconnect. Like people, hardcore fans, they don't like the way NBC covers things in any sport, it sounds like, because the goal of NBC is to get you to not change that channel, to get someone else invested, so that when the meet's on again, or it's the Olympics or the World Championships, they're like, I got to watch that. I saw that one meet. It was so interesting. Or I saw that competition. It was so interesting. And so it is this sort of battle. And it makes me think of this bib thing, because the feedback I get all the time is like, innovate. You guys are so boring. You haven't changed broadcasts, and it's like with the bib, we're practicing and trying out some new technology. So we can get your speed in the exact moment. We can get the exact distance of how far you are. We can get the exact time of like, they are 6.2 seconds behind. And so, maybe that isn't helpful, but we are trying to like think of other ways to help share the sport. We can't do that without the bib. And also, just one other thing about the bib that I just wanted to say is that the bib, if there's a bib with a sponsorship logo on it, that's actually good for the athletes. That means someone's investing in this track meet. That means someone's trying to get airtime. You're probably getting a flight or a hotel room, all of that thing. That money goes to the meet, which then in fact helps you have the opportunity to be there and run in that race. And so the bibs are not a problem, peeps.
There's plenty of problems in track and field. I wouldn't start with the bib. I don't think it's a problem
it
at all.
wouldn't make
Like,
my top 100.
Whole leather list of things that we could get into. That's really funny. Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing to remember is like, you hear like, oh, this is just for the money. This is just to line the pockets. Like, this isn't for the athletes, but you gotta like, they kind of coexist, and it doesn't always feel like it. But generally, if money's coming in, it's to grow the sport. It's to sell the sport. It's to give to the athlete. It's about building something for the future. Like, I think, again, it kind of goes to the zoom out, where it's like, okay, it might feel a certain way, but like, get the whole story before we start just being upset for the sake of being upset.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to express your opinions and ask questions. I would never want athletes to think like they couldn't say, wait, why is the trial starting at noon? Wait, why do I have to wear this bib with this sensor behind it? I think that's fine. I just think, what am I trying to say here? Our automatic reaction, I feel like lately, is they're trying to screw us.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm for sure going down after this episode, because I'm for sure talking for the man right now. I am literally the freaking man. Like, I hate myself. But yeah, without money coming in, there are no opportunities for athletes. So we have to exist in this symbiotic relationship where we're working together, where, we like, the media is trying to support you and get you on. And we want you to run well. We want to have these cool stories, because if not, we're going to stop covering it. And guess what? It is going to die. And it sucks. That sucks. But it is sort of the reality, is that we need to learn how to respect each other, understand why there is media, understand why there are cities that have to understand the whole ecosystem instead of just being like, I can't believe I have to wear that damn bib.
I agree. I mean, I think it's just hopefully people are listening to the end here and got some new perspective. I think that's the thing too, is like this all goes down on Twitter and you're just, I mean, even if you pay for the blue check, you're still like, no one's going to read all of that. So we're limited in what we can say. And I think, again, transparency, I think that I'm excited to get this email that's going to come out and have a better picture. And, I think if you can start believing a little bit more in USATF, and when you see what the what's and whys, that's going to go a long way. And then you can create that relationship where it's not just like, well, they're out to get us. It's more like, oh, okay, we're in this together.
Totally. Okay, well, we thought this episode was going to be so spicy, but I feel like we've done a really good job of keeping this level, just sharing our opinions.
Kara, one day we need to get an episode that we just disagree on something.
I thought we were going to disagree on the new gen thing.
What did you think I was going to say? That
I thought you were going to be like, I mean,
push that kid.
I don't know. Like you started to say something and then we were like, well, just hold it. We'll talk about it on the pod. I don't know. I thought you were going to kind of be like, everyone's reacting to nothing. And I don't know. I mean, I know that's what's funny is that turns out we have a lot in common.
Uh-oh. That's not We'll find a topic.
We'll find something we disagree on so we can be more entertaining.
All right. I'm into it.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. And yeah, let us know what you think. Thanks for joining us.